Namaste and welcome. My name is Payal and I am your host today. Today on the Festival of Bharat talk show, on the countdown to Diwali, we will be talking about the Valmiki Ramayan. For those who do not know, this version of the Ramayan is the one they say is the most factual, the one which describes the events of the Ram story as exact as possible. And actually, recently I have just watched a version of this on a YouTube channel called 21 Notes. And this version did teach me many new things. It was definitely more poetic. Lots of pearls of new wisdom I learned from it. And it clarified a lot of my doubts of the Ramayana and gave an extra wow factor. So today, we have the creator of this series. We are honored to have him. So let's welcome Yashodeep Ji.
Thank you.
How are you, sir?
Very good. Thank you. Namaste.
So before we start on the main questions, I'll just give you a little bit of a background, Yashodeep Ji. Yashodeep Ji is a graduate in mechanical engineering from IIT Mumbai and PGDBM from IIM Ahmedabad. He previously worked as a consultant with McKinsey & Co. and then successfully launched his own company, Derrick Petroleum Services, in the global and gas industry. He has now devoted himself to the task of researching the original Valmiki Ramayan in Sanskrit and reconnecting today's youth with the epic. How amazing. That's all I can say. You're another gem in our society. So thank you. Thank you for changing your life course and focusing on this.
Thank you.
So before we go into the actual Valmiki Ramayan and into some of the insights you would like to share with us, my first question would be on the production. This amazing production I have just watched, and I was mesmerized. I was so engaged. Honestly, I thought I would just watch a couple of episodes, and I watched it all. So some words on what inspired you to put this together would be great first.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'm delighted to be here on this platform and to share with you what little I know about the Valmiki Ramayan. And really, your question and your comments as we started off are very interesting. Just like you said, you found many new and interesting things about the Ramayana. We are all familiar with the broad story of the Ramayana. And so was I before I started on this journey. I thought I knew the Ramayana. But there are a lot of questions in our mind. We're not sure about many things. Little things like how could Hanuman fly across the ocean to get to Lanka? How did he grow in size? Or even broader questions such as, is it fact or fiction? And what is the relevance of this ancient epic in today's world? Who are the Vanaras? Who are the Rakshasas? What about the Pushpak Viman? So many questions. And like you said, the Valmiki Ramayan actually answers all these questions and much more. I happened to read a commentary and translation of the Valmiki Ramayan. And I was so amazed by what I read that I had to read the original, and thus my journey started. So I started reading the original Valmiki Ramayan in Sanskrit, and that left me stunned. And I had to share what I had read with others. It's like if you read a good book, you want to tell your friends, hey, you must read this book or watch this movie. I would like you to read the Valmiki Ramayan. But I know that this is not accessible to everyone. 24,000 shlokas in Sanskrit. And so this effort of 21 notes, what I'm trying to do here is make it accessible in short format videos, 7-9 minute videos you can watch on your phone or on your TV in simple language, but most importantly, connecting you directly to the Maharshi's words. There's as little of interpretation, as little of my take on this as possible. What I'm trying to do is connect you to the original text. And that is why the name of this series, 21 Notes, Notes from the Past for 21st Century. I would like you to read the book, but if you don't have time, here are the notes, underlined passages or highlighted passages, but connecting you directly to the Maharshi's words. So that's the effort.
So why do you think that this version of the Ramayan is less, would you say it's less popular than other versions, and why so, if so?
Well, it is less known. So what we generally know of the Ramayan many times comes from later retellings. And why that is so is hard to explain. There are the earlier versions connected with people at an earlier time. But I found that surprisingly, the Valmiki Ramayan, which is the oldest of them all, is also the most contemporary. It will connect with the contemporary mind more than some of the later retellings. And let's remember that, see, these days there are a lot of questions about what exactly happened. So there are different versions. Is this true or is that true? And throughout our tradition, we have always considered the Valmiki Ramayan as itihaas. Itihaas literally means that is how it happened. So to the question, what exactly happened, the reference text is the Valmiki Ramayan. That is the Praman.
Excellent. So on that note, you said, people are debating what actually happened. So are the incidences of the Ramayan fiction or fact?
See, Maharshi Valmiki wrote this as fact. He was writing the biography of a real person. He calls it itihaas. He says what he is writing is Ramasya Charitam, Ramasya Vrittam, Ram's biography, Ram's story. And he's writing about a real person. He uses the word Nara. In fact, the very second verse of these 24,000 verses, he says, Kon vasmin sampradam loke gunavan kascha viryavan dharmadnyascha kritadnyascha satyavakyo dridavratah. The first phrase, Kon vasmin sampratam loke, it means who in the world lives today? Valmiki is asking, who in the world lives today that has the following qualities? He follows dharma, he is grateful, and so on. And he goes on for another couple of shloks, listing out the traits that he wants in the ideal person. And so the phrase, who in the world lives today, Sampratam, means that he was writing about somebody that lived at the same time as him. Also, so clearly from his point of view, he was writing itihaas, facts. Also, throughout our tradition, we have considered Valmiki Ramayan as itihaas. Even those who did the later retellings always acknowledged that Valmiki's version is itihaas. And I'll give you some examples, how this is different from how we generally understand the Ramayana. For example, in the Valmiki Ramayan, there is no mention of the Lakshman Rekha. Many of us think, yes, of course, in so many paintings or frescoes or sculptures, you find the Lakshman Rekha mentioned. There is no mention of floating rocks to make a bridge. So in some cases, these stories are not mentioned at all. And in other cases, the stories are told differently. I'll give you an example. Shabri's story, Ma Shabri's story, as it is generally understood, is that she was discriminated against, she was not accepted by other people, and she offered Ram half-eaten fruits. And Ram accepted those half-eaten fruits to make the point that she should not be discriminated against. Right? That's how it is told in later times. How Valmiki tells this story is as follows. Shabri joined Matanga Muni's ashram when she was young as a maid or an attendant. She was helping out with chores and she joined the ashram. But she would also sit in on the discussions among the rishis. And Valmiki says, Vidnyane tam nityam abahishkritam. She was never kept away from knowledge. Abahishkritam, not kept away. So in fact, she used to sit in on these discussions, and over time, she gained a lot of knowledge and she became a siddha, an accomplished ascetic. And interestingly, she was also siddha sammata. She was acknowledged, respected by other accomplished ascetics. So there was no discrimination. Matanga Muni passed away, and the other rishis moved on. They went to other places. So Shabari was the only person left in the ashram. And when Ram came, she offered him fruits from the trees that Matanga Muni had planted. That is the original story. Why is it that in later retellings it was told the way it is? Well, one thing could be that the Ramayana, the structure of the Ramayana was used to point out, in later times there was discrimination in society, and therefore people wanted to point out that it is incorrect. And they used the structure of the Ramayana, the structure of this story, to make the point that people should not be discriminated against. However, if you're trying to see what exactly happened, it is the authentic version is the Valmiki's telling of this incident.
I think, a lot of the times before when I've seen other versions or read other versions, there are times I have felt this is really hard to believe. And
Yes.
After I watched your series, I felt actually this is not so hard to believe. It does feel like it was something which would have happened. So that was my feeling. It's changed. So it's incredible, your series. It's actually done that to me, the Valmiki Ramayan, should I say. But
Yes.
so I think the audience should definitely explore the Valmiki Ramayan just to see for themselves that, I think there's not only so much convincing we can do, I guess, isn't it? So let's go into some of the things which may have been hard to believe. And they're made clear now via the Valmiki Ramayan, such as who were the Vanaras?
Yes. Well, actually, there are two questions you are asking there. One is about some of these incidents are hard to believe. Now, in the Valmiki Ramayana itself, there are some such incidents. And we should remember that while we say that this is itihaas, what is the meaning of itihaas? Itihaas is purva vrittam kathayuktam itihasam prachakshate. Purva vrittam, that which has happened in the past, and kathayuktam, that which is told in story format. Itihasam prachakshate is known as itihaas. So there are incidents around which there may be embellishments. And how do we know which is the fact and which is the embellishment? Well, we only know if we read it. Because through the style of writing, it is often clear whether this is a factual listing or an embellishment. For example, at Panchavati, after the incident with Shurpanakha went and complained to Khar. And Khar sent off 14 Rakshasas to kill Ram and Lakshman. Ram defeated them all and killed them. Shurpanakha went back and told Khar that the 14 Rakshasas are dead. Khar was surprised, and he sent a much bigger force. Note, a much bigger force, and he came himself as well to attack Ram. Now today, if we have to say, well, something was much bigger, sometimes we say that was 1,000,000 times bigger. Does it mean that it is exactly 1,000,000 times bigger? Here also, Valmiki says that the army this time consisted of 14,000 Rakshasas. And Ram, on the other hand, was by himself. Lakshman was protecting Sita, and Ram killed them all. So if you look at it at face value, this is hard to believe. One person on one side, 14,000 on the other. How could he defeat them all? But really, there could be an embellishment. 14,000 only means that the second army was much larger than the first army, which had 14 Rakshasas. So, Purva Vrittam Kathayuktam. It is important to understand that as we read through the story. But your second question on Vanaras, that is very interesting. There are a lot of misconceptions, and there is a lot of confusion about who were the Vanaras. Some people think that they were monkeys, others think they were apes or Neanderthal man, all sorts of ideas. If you look at the words used by Valmiki, it's actually very clear that the Vanaras were humans. Their capital city, Kishinda, is described as Hrishta Pushta Jana Kirna. Jana Akirna. Jana means people. He also uses the word Purusha, Nari, Stri to refer to the Vanaras and Vanaris. Clearly, he was referring to humans. But these people also lived in the forest. And so the words used by Valmiki are Vanacharinaha, Vanaukasaha, Kananaukasaha, etc. All of them mean people who roamed in the forest, lived in the forest. But of course, the confusion arises for two reasons. One, they had a tail. And so where did that come from? Also, the words used by Valmiki, on one hand, he's called Jana, Nari, Stri, Purush, but he also uses the words Vanara, Plavangamaha, Shakha Mrugaha, Plavamanaha. All of these mean monkeys. And Sugriv, Kapiraja, Kapishwara, Hariraj, which means the leader of the monkeys. Now note, all of these are descriptive words. So Plavangamaha means those who can leap. Shakha Mrugaha means Shakha, branch. Mrugaha, animal, animals who are on tree branches. All of them are typically used to denote monkeys. So why was he using these words? Well, these forest dwellers actually took an effort to look like monkeys. Even today, we have forest communities who dress up in a particular way. They may put up horns on their head or wear feathers to look like a particular bird or animal, any natural force that they look up to. The Vanaras took the effort to look like monkeys. They put on a tail, and most likely they also put on something on their head like a face mask. But it was something that they could remove. So this attire could be removed. In fact, the first time if you were to stage, the Ramayan, the first time the Vanaras would come on stage in a significant way is when Ram and Lakshman are going south from Panchavati looking for Sita, and they come near the region of modern-day Hampi, where atop the Rishamukh mountain, Sugriv and Hanuman are watching them come closer. And Sugriv wants Hanuman to go and find out who they are. And he tells them to go and talk to them. And Hanuman goes, but as per Sugriv's instruction, he takes off his monkey attire. Kapi Rupam Parityajya. So he takes off his monkey attire and goes and talks to them. In fact, this attire is something that is referred to in other places also. It was something that they could take off. So these Vanaras were essentially, no doubt, people who roamed in the forest, lived in the forest, and dressed like monkeys. And another misconception about the Vanaras sometimes is that perhaps they were a different race or their intellectual and cultural traditions were different. But Valmiki shows that in fact they were not a different race, and their intellectual and cultural traditions were common to the people who lived in the villages and the cities. As far as descent goes, the Vanaras were descendants of sometimes rishis. So sons of rishis could become a Vanar if they wanted to live in a forest. Valmiki gives a particular example. There was a rishi called Marichi, and his sons became Vanaras. They adopted the forest lifestyle. And among them was Archishman. Maharshi Putram Maricham Archishmantam Mahakapim. That's the phrase he uses. As sons of rishis, of course, they were not racially different from the people of the villages or towns. And even Ravan, he was a descendant of rishis as well. His father was a Muni. So they were not culturally different. They were not racially different. Culturally also, they had the same practices. Hanuman is Sarva Shastra Visharadaha. He knew all the Shastras. He was an expert on the Vedas. Not only Hanuman, Tara too. Sugriv is called Dharmadnya. He knew Dharma. So the Vanaras were not really that different apart from the way they dressed. Unfortunately, we tried to slot them into some modern template, and that's where the confusion arises.
Interesting. That again was such a enlightening new fact that I wasn't aware of, and I know many wouldn't have, in the audience wouldn't be aware of. And it just gives that whole removes that hard to believe factor when you've said it in that way, which it's really refreshing. It's really refreshing because it makes you really dig further into the Ramayan, because you know that this, it gives you more insight in feeling that it was real. Yeah, and actually let's move on to the Rakshasas then, on the same note, because that's also another question mark, right? Yes. So what's your feeling? What does the Valmiki Ramayan say about the Rakshasas then?
Once again, about the Rakshasas too, there are a lot of misconceptions. So some people believe that they were the people of Sri Lanka or South India. Also, typically, if you ask a child to draw a Rakshas, they will draw them as crude, fearsome, and ugly. Once again, Valmiki shatters these stereotypes. We spoke about Vanaras, how they made an entry. Now, the first Rakshas that would come, if you were staging the Ramayana, the first Rakshas that would come onto the stage was Tataka, or as she's called in Hindi, Tadaka. Tataka lived 2 days walking distance away from Ayodhya. So she lived in North India. Shatters the stereotype that Rakshasas were only in South India or Sri Lanka. Also, Tataka was not born a Rakshasi. She was in fact born in a very good family. Unfortunately, she took a turn towards cruelty and she became full of Rakshasness. The word is Rakshasatvam. So she became because of her bad behavior. That was about Tataka. And we see that the Rakshasas that Ram and Lakshman meet up to Lanka, many of them were not born Rakshasas. They became Rakshasas because of their behavior. Of course, in Lanka, the word Rakshas is used to refer to Ravan's clan. And here we see them in detail for the first time when Hanuman comes to Lanka looking for Sita. And at night, he goes around Lanka and he sees the city and he sees the people. The words Valmiki has used here are interesting. He says that what Hanuman saw, he saw many Rakshasas, and they were Virupan, Surupan, Bahurupan. Some were hideous, some were very handsome. They came in all forms. Some wore good clothes, the others wore rags. Also, Hanuman heard Vedic chants in the air. He saw Vedic altars. He saw images of Lakshmi. And interestingly, on some of the houses, he also saw the swastik symbol. So clearly, this fight with the Rakshasas was not a fight of one race against the other, or of Vedic and non-Vedic societies. Again, we were talking of race. We saw that some of the Vanaras were born to rishis. Of course, the people of Ayodhya and the Janapads, also some of them were born to rishis. And Ravan too. Ravan's father was a Muni, Vishrava. His mother, Kaikasi, was a Rakshasi. Once again, it is these misunderstandings that are clearly sorted out or addressed by the Valmiki Ramayan.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying in this is a lot of the exaggerated versions of the Ramayan, they give it a gross factor, like the Rakshas is like a different, but actually subtle behavioral, egotistical stuff, which is determining the fact that they're Rakshas, not because of how they look and their physical aspects, yes. Right? So I guess the other versions were probably written by those who have like very extraordinary imaginations in some ways, would you say?
Yes, and also maybe some of the things have been exaggerated in the later versions. So Valmiki himself also does some poetic embellishment, but in the later versions that is perhaps exaggerated.
Makes sense. So, and I guess I was going to ask you the question on Ravan and his 10 heads. So I guess that also maybe there is always a talked about topic. So maybe you can just elaborate on that as well then.
Sure. And Ravan, we always imagine him as having 10 heads. And interestingly, if you ask a child to draw Ravan today, it will always be one head in the middle, 5 on one side, and 4 on the other. Right? That's how we see Ravan's 10 heads. And even Valmiki has used the words Dashanana and Dashamukha, which means the one with 10 heads, to refer to Ravan. Okay. But what is interesting is this, that he has described Ravan's form in great detail. When Hanuman goes to Lanka, like we spoke before, he saw the other Rakshasas. He looked for Sita all over the city, and then he went inside Ravan's palace. It was nighttime. Ravan was sleeping, and he saw Ravan's sleeping form. And through Hanuman's eyes, Valmiki has described Ravan's sleeping form. And there it is clear, he talks of the head as singular. So he does not use the plural for heads. He uses the words Ananam and Mahamukhat. So he had only one head. And also for arms, he uses the word Bhujau. Now, just like we have singular and plural forms of words, in Sanskrit, we also have the dual form, the Dvivachan, when you are referring to exactly two objects. And Bhujau is a Dvivachan. So there were only two arms. But then what about the 10 heads and 20 arms? Also, when Ravan stepped out for battle in the Yuddhakand, Vibhishan and Ram saw them from a distance. And Vibhishan pointed out Ravan to Ram. Ram had never seen him, right? Till that time. If he had 10 heads, what do you think Vibhishan would have said? There, that person with 10 heads is Ravan. But what he said was, Ravan had come riding a great chariot with a canopy, a chhatra on top. And Vibhishan said, there, that person under the white canopy, that towering person who is radiant like the sun, that is Ravan. Okay, so once again, there he's talking of only, he would not have had 10 heads. However, what about the use of the words Dashanana and Dashamukha? And interestingly, going back in the story a little bit, when Shurpanakha came, and when Khar had been killed and Shurpanakha came and reported to Ravan, Ravan was on his throne, on his magnificent throne, holding court with his ministers. And Shurpanakha came in. And then Valmiki says, through Shurpanakha's eyes, she saw Ravan. And the words used are, Vimshad Bhujam Dashad Grivam Darshaniya Parichadam. It was a sight to see, with 10 heads and 20 arms. Okay, so on his throne, he appeared as though he had 10 heads and 20 arms, although he didn't. Most likely he had a throne which had 10 heads or 9 heads, and the 10th one, his real one. And his throne was one which gave the appearance that he had 20 arms. Remember, Ravan was extremely powerful, and he wanted to project that power. He wanted people to be fearful of him. And so this is symbolic, having 10 heads, having the power perhaps of 10 people. Many people have described the symbolism behind the 10 heads. But Valmiki's use of the words and the situation makes it clear that they were not real.
That's so clear, in that point, and it just makes so much sense again. On that subtle, gross thing, and how to just poetically give yourself a sense of more power. Why not say you have 10 heads? It really does make sense, right? If you think about it in that way. So real just gem of insights you're giving here. So just thank you. So let's move on to the geography, which I really found interesting in your series. And you're talking about all of these places, in particular, of course, in Ram and Sita and Lakshman's exile, and all the places they stayed and visited. And there's also mention of how certain characters knew about faraway places, right? So I would be, really keen, and I'm sure there's people in the audience who would love to visit some of these places. So do these places still exist? And are they possible to go visit? And maybe you can mention a few of the places.
Yes, of course. The main places where the story plays out, where the Ramayana plays out, are all, you can visit them today. Ayodhya, of course. Valmiki has described Ayodhya in great detail. He probably had a very special, corner for the city, a special feeling for the city. And then after they stepped out into exile, the description of Chitrakoot, then Panchavati near Nasik, Kishkinda near modern day Hampi, and then of course Lanka. All of these places Valmiki has described in great detail. He describes the seasons there, the trees. There are a lot of descriptions and lists actually of trees that are found in different areas. In Panchavati, near Nasik, you can go even today, and they point out a particular point in the river Godavari, and they say that this is where Ram used to take his bath. And there's a cave nearby, and they say this is, which is called Sita Guha. This is where Sita took refuge when Khar's army attacked them. So it is so interesting to go to these places and feel that this is actually where it happened. Again,
Have you been?
near Kishkinda also. So the description of Kishkinda, if you've been to Hampi and those areas, the landscape is of big boulders, red boulders, and some of them covered with a little grayish because of the moss, a little dark, some of them a little light or whitish. And that's how he describes Kishkinda as well, with forests and big boulders. So it is very interesting to go to these places now and, tally what we find today with how things are described then.
So I was just asking, have you been to any of these places?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's definitely on my list when I travel to India next.
Kishkinda's landscape was particularly striking for me.
Yeah, your favorite. Okay.
Yes. And of course, Panchavati. There's the description of Panchavati in the winter time through Lakshman's words. So Lakshman is not a very emotional character in the Ramayana. He is reserved. He doesn't say much. But this is one place where even he's moved by the beauty of what he sees, Panchavati in winter.
On my list, definitely to go next time I'm in India. So on characters, you just mentioned Lakshman, and just there's so much gems of wisdom in the Ramayana, in particular what I noticed in the Valmiki. And there's points where, the characters and their decisions, which just make your heart melt, something which is very rare in modern day time to see qualities in humans like that. So what are your favorites? What are your the takeaways from the Ramayana?
Of course, there is so much to learn from the different characters. One thing I can point out right now is Ram's demonstration, exemplary demonstration of two things, acceptance and action. So when the time calls for acceptance, when he was exiled, there was no fault of his. He was the rightful successor. But Dashrath had given Kaikeyi two promises. It's like he had given Kaikeyi two blank checks. And Kaikeyi came back with the amounts filled up. On one check, she wrote that Bharat should be made king. And on the other check, she wrote that Ram should be exiled. And Ram said that he would honor the king's word. He would uphold the king's word, whatever the cost for him, because that is the highest dharma. And he did it without any anger, without any irritation, without any negative thinking at all. This was exemplary acceptance when there is no action to be done. When you accept what it is, even if it's not what you wanted, even if it is unfair to you. But on the other hand, when Sita was kidnapped by Ravan, that was not the time for acceptance. And think about it. He's been in the forest for years. He's alone with his brother, and Sita is gone. And he has no idea where she is. And then he finds out, well, she's been kidnapped. He says he will move heaven and earth to find her and get her back safely. And that's exactly what he does. He went and made an alliance with Sugriv, and together they sent off an army of millions to find out where Sita is. They found out that she was in Lanka, and then they built a bridge. Just think about it, a bridge across the sea. They went across the sea, attacked Ravan, defeated him, and got Sita back safely. So that is exemplary action. That is not the time for acceptance. And every action, whether it is acceptance or action rooted in dharma, what is the right thing to do? Right thing to do for what? For the welfare of the world, for the well-being of the world. That is, this is exemplary behavior from which we can learn and apply in every moment of our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's too much, of course. I mean, I think on this note, I mean, I think to the audience, if you want to find out more, there's so many pearls of wisdom, so many gems in this series that Yashodeep Ji has put together on 21 notes. It will 100% inspire you, your children. So Diwali is coming, and I really do encourage you all to watch this version. We will send the details on the description of the video, so please look out for that as well. Yashodeep, any final words before we move on to next week and celebrate Diwali? And
Perhaps, I may say one thing at the end. What is the relevance of the Valmiki Ramayan in today's world? And oftentimes, we are not clear about that. Even if we like the Ramayan, we sometimes have this thinking that it is something for the children. And yes, of course, it is something for the children, but it is for us too. Why did Valmiki write the Ramayan to start with? He wrote it because there was bad behavior in society, Rakshasi tendencies, and so he wanted to set the highest example of good behavior. There are Rakshasi tendencies in our society, in ourselves today as well. Of course, they're always there. And therefore, the Valmiki Ramayan is always relevant. As long as there is bad behavior in society, it is relevant because it can serve as a guide to help us be the best that we can be. And so that is really, something that I found out after many months or years of this, that it can be applied in our day-to-day lives. It is an inspiration and a guide in today's world, for all times to come, and in our day-to-day lives.
It's a beautiful note to end, so thank you. And just one thing, I've completed your season 5. I'm waiting for season 6. I hope that will be released soon. Because it's too much of a cliffhanger, season 5.
Yes,
so
yes. Working hard on that. So season 6 will come in a few months, and we will finish the series in English. And then we've done 3 seasons in Hindi, and we'll take up the remaining seasons in Hindi as well.
Excellent. So thank you so much, Yashodeep Ji. I think you're doing amazing work, and just how you're connecting to the youth through your projects is really incredible. And,
thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to speaking to your audience.
You're most welcome. So to the audience, please, if you have liked this video, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, and you'll see a lot of other content of similar nature. So please do. Namaste, everyone. everyone. Take care and happy Shubh Diwali.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.